Okay, welcome back. In today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance cards. So I'll start off with this Pokemon Crystal version. Now, this doesn't even have a screw, and somebody broke the post on the other side of this shell, so I can't even screw this together. So this is just going to be held together in some sort of fashion. They also put some sort of tape here. I don't know what that's for, but yeah, the post is missing, and I cannot screw this back together. But nonetheless, the card doesn't work, and I'm going to take a look at what's going on. So upon firing it up, I don't get a full Nintendo logo. It's all glitched up. So that's usually a sign that the Game Boy cartridge isn't making contact with the Game Boy. So it could be one of three things. It could have bad traces, it could be dirty contacts, or the chip just needs to be reflowed. So I'm looking at these contacts. They don't look too dirty, so I wouldn't worry about it being dirty contacts. So I'm going to look elsewhere. Okay, on closer inspection, I don't see any rust on the board. I don't see any sign of there being a broken trace. So it'll be just easier for me to reflow this chip and see if that solves the problem, then try to pin for pin test for continuity. If I don't get anything out of reflowing this chip, I'll reflow the RAM chip on next to it. And if I don't get anything after that, then I'll start looking for broken traces or other faults. And now we're getting a Nintendo logo, and it's fading, and the game fired up. So now I'm just going to make sure that this game saves, and I suspect somebody already changed the battery on it, trying to fix the problem, because there was a aftermarket battery inside this game. So I suspect that the battery's good, but I'll test it nonetheless. So it seems the battery is holding the save. Now I wish that this cartridge didn't have a broken screw post, then I'd be able to close it back together good as new. But it's still working now, so on to the GBA card. So here's Mega Man Battle Network 6. I'm going to pop this into the Game Boy and see what's going on. Now the game seems to be firing up just fine, so let me test the save feature, see if the game saves. Sometimes these games are sold as broken because they need a new battery. So it says save failed, so there's a problem. So let me see if this game uses a battery or if there's a RAM chip that I have to swap. So yeah, it doesn't use a battery. It uses a 256K FRAM chip. So let me reflow the FRAM chip. Maybe I can get something out of it. Maybe there's a cracked joint or cold joint rather, and see if I can get this game to save. So when I'm reflowing a chip like this, I like to add a lot of flux. It just makes my job easier, and I don't get any bridges, and I can get through this much quicker. In this case, it's not that simple, so I'm gonna look for a suitable donor to get the FRAM chip off and swap the FRAM chip. So I have this Yu-Gi-Oh game here. Now this is one of the revisions because I was looking through a couple of these Yu-Gi-Oh games and some have the FRAM chip and some use a battery. So in this case, this one does have the FRAM chip and the board revision is different. So it's not as simple as just doing a board swap. Most people look for the board. See at the bottom here, AGB Y11 and AGB E11. Now from what I understand, that could be incompatible. Here you can see but the chips are the same. So I'm not, yeah, if you look at the components now, looking back at the footage, most of the components on one board are missing on the other and vice versa. But the only thing that they share similar is the FRAM chip. So the Yu-Gi-Oh game, there's plenty of them and I can swap out just the FRAM chip. Now if I really looked, I'm willing to bet that I can find these chips from a Chinese distributor, but instead of waiting several weeks for the chips to come in, I'll just take this chip now and see if this solves my issue. Then later down the road, if I want to save the Yu-Gi-Oh game, I'll just order some chips and slap a FRAM chip on the Yu-Gi-Oh game. Now this board is so small that I just tried to poke it, try to lift the chip up with some tweezers, and the board likes to slip back and forth. So just bear with me. I hope nobody gets motion sickness from this. Looking back, I should have taped this board down with some Captain tape and that would have made the job so much easier. But yeah, I don't like to think on the spur of the moment. Another thing I should have did was, maybe I shouldn't have, but I could have if I wanted to, drag some desoldering braid across these pins just so this chip can lay perfect, because this chip is teetering on the pins, because it's still each pad is elevated a bit, so this chip was teetering back and forth, so it gave me a little bit of more trouble than it should have, but I eventually did get it. And if I were to clear up the pads, I would have to add more solder, which I really didn't want to do at the time. So it took me more time to get it even, but I guess that was the right thing to do. Since I added so much flux, I'm gonna clear this caramelized flux, this spent flux, with some alcohol and a toothbrush, just because it takes 2 seconds, and I can then test it after this. So I'll put this cartridge back together without the screw, and then I'll test it out. It's always when I go to record that these games make me look like an amateur. The game doesn't want to fire up right away, so I'll reseat the cartridge and eventually it does fire up. So I might have to go back and clean those contacts a bit. But let's test the save feature. So when I do save, it says okay, your save is complete, so that's a good sign. So now I gotta turn it off and see if the game actually does hold the save. So apparently this game is saving now because it's asking me to continue, so there's a save file on this cartridge. So last off, I'll just add the screw and close this game up, and that's 2 more carts for the working pile. So in closing, I just want to thank everybody for leaving positive feedback. I really appreciate everybody's comment. It really gives me motivation to put out more and more content. So until next time, thank you for watching.